9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to S2 Build Together event. Seeing this room filled with leaders, designers, partners, clients, and friends is incredibly meaningful. Today is about more than a date in the calendar. It's about community. It's about conversation. And it's about what we can create when we choose to build together. On behalf of S2 Architecture, thank you for being here. I'm Geneviève Giguère, and I'm one of the partners at S2, and it's my pleasure to be here to kick off this event. This event would not exist without the generous support of our sponsors. Your commitment to this conversation and the broader industry makes today possible. To our volunteer speakers who are sharing their time, insight, vulnerability, thank you. It takes courage to stand up and share your story. And I know something about that because those of you that work with me on a daily basis know that I don't like to talk about myself. To our S2 team members who have volunteered countless hours behind the scenes with the logistic, programming, and outreach, we are so proud of you. And every person in this room, thank you for choosing to show up. The theme we're gathering around today is give to gain. It's a simple phrase, but it carries a lot of weight. In an industry that can often feel competitive, fast-paced, outcome-driven, give to gain invites us to pause and reconsider how we define success. It reminds us that most meaningful gains rarely come from taking more, they come from giving more. When I think about my own career, that idea resonates deeply. Early on, I didn't really fully understand what leadership meant. Like most people stepping into a new role, I confused management with leadership. I thought it was about, directing, organizing, making sure everything gets done properly. Over time, and thanks to great role models and peers who I could bounce ideas with, I realized that leadership is much quieter. It's about support. It's about enabling others to succeed. It's about getting to know someone, understand what they're passionate about, and supporting them to find a path forward. Some of the most important leadership moments in my career did not happen in the boardroom or at seminars. They happened in small, impromptu conversations, in moments where someone took the time to guide rather than give answers, moments where someone provided that encouragement through challenging times. That culture, one that is supportive rather than directive, has been ingrained in S2 from the beginning. It shaped me, and it continues to shape me on how I try to lead every day. Going through architecture school, the gender split was, I'll say, probably about 50-50. But when I entered my profession here in Western Canada, things look very different. I work in a few offices where there were no female architects. I didn't set out with a grand strategy to change that. I simply wanted to build a meaningful career, but it often felt like I had to change who I was at the core to fit in. Over time, I found my voice. I realized that visibility matters. When young women see someone in leadership who looks like them, it expands what feels possible. That part of give to gain, that's part of give to gain. When we give mentorship, visibility, sponsorship, encouragement, we gain a stronger profession. When we give our time to listen, to collaborate, to truly understand another perspective, we gain better architecture. We all see the world differently, and those perspectives are what makes our work richer and more interesting. I'm often asked, what's my most proud moment in my career? Well, it's not a single project, and it's not a title. It's the journey. I started at S2 just a few years out of school, and I have been very fortunate to work on so many great projects with incredible individuals. And ultimately, it helped shape a culture that genuinely cares about people. Now being in a position where I can help others build their own path, that's the most meaningful part of what I do. That is what we hope Build Together becomes. It's not just an event, but it's a catalysis. A place where ideas are shared openly, where we challenge one another respectfully, where we recognize that giving our insight, experience, and even our uncertainty creates collective gain. Today, I encourage you to lean into the conversation, share your stories, offer your perspective. You may not see the immediate impact that will have, but I promise you it's worth it. Architecture is ultimately about people, how they live, how they work, how they gather, and how they feel in the spaces we create. If we want to design communities that thrive, we need professional communities that thrive. And that requires generosity of time, of knowledge, and of support. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to give your time, your attention, and your presence. Together, we can gain a stronger industry, stronger relationship, and create stronger communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda nations, the Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Tsuut'ina Nation. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Otipisiwaa Métis government of the Métis Nation, Calgary Nose Hill Métis District, and Calgary Elbow Métis District. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, play, and create on this land, and who honor and celebrate this territory.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing our first keynote speaker, Carrie Soul. Carrie is the Vice President, Park Development and Major Projects at the Calgary Stampede, where she leads strategic oversight and tactical delivery of the organization's park development master plan. Since 2018, she has overseen transformative projects that are reshaping Stampede Park, including the Stampede Sound Center, the 17th Avenue Extension and Stampede Station upgrade, the introduction of new Stampede Park entry features, and the $500 million expansion of the BMO Center, which is now Western Canada's largest convention center. Currently, Carrie is leading the North Infield Suites design, which is designed by S2 and Populous. And Carrie brings design and project delivery expertise to complex development projects. Carrie is a registered architect with the AAA and a certified PMP.
Great. Welcome. Nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. I wanted to thank you for having me today. I'm going to try and take you on a little bit of an abbreviated journey of my career. It starts out a little rough. Maybe you'll hear some echoing of some comments that Jen made, but fear not, it's got a fairly happy ending. I've illustrated it with a few recent project highlights, some of which Steve just talked about, and perhaps I can leave you today with a touch of inspiration. So this year's International Women's Day theme, as Jen mentioned, is Give to Gain. And so in researching that, it emphasizes the power of reciprocity and support. Let's see if I'm always tricky with these clickers. There we go, reciprocity. So I had to look that up because it's not a word that I actually use a lot in my daily vocabulary. So I looked it up, and here we are, the practice of exchanging things with others for mutual benefit. And in thinking about that word, reciprocity, I decided that the word mutual was probably the part when I started out my career that was challenging for me as an intern. And if some of you are interns, you probably recognize this. In those days, I felt like I exchanged too much of my time for not enough money. I exchanged too many of my ideas for not enough praise. And it didn't feel mutual at those times. And I often felt like it was a grind, and I felt alone, sort of like this poor soul here in the Sam Center. This is the Ross Glen Temporary Gallery. This was finished a few years ago. Really great project if you haven't been to it. But since that time, I've come to understand that actually what I gained through that period in my career was strength, resilience, and the ability to exist on very little sleep, which I will tell you as a woman who has just turned 50 is serving me well once again. Yeah. Thank you. Support is the other word. And so the definition of support is bear all or part of the weight and to hold up. And so this is an earlier shot of the SAM Center. This is when the glue lamb structure was going up. Everyone needs good people to hold them up. And I'm going to echo what Jen said. When I started early in my career, I didn't see an equal number of women blazing trails in architecture. They were there, but they weren't necessarily in leadership roles. And they were hard to find. And if they were leaders, I didn't necessarily have access to them at that point. And so in terms of finding that support, I really had to get creative. I had to speak to people that I felt could help me in my path. I had to ask questions that I had to push for those opportunities. One thing that I'm really passionate about is mentoring and advocates. And so I noted here, find strategic alignment with mentors and advocates. And this is a rendering of our new entry features designed by Alberta artist, Indigenous artist Jason Carter. So we informally call the one at the front the big and the one at the back the little. And if you have seen them at park at night, they're really, really fantastic. We're really proud of them. And so this was sort of a bit of tongue-in-cheek between big and little and my segue into mentorship and advocating. If you're on the architecture path, that's a checkbox. You have to have a mentor, and they have to sign off on your hours. But I like to use the word advocate. If you can find yourself an advocate, somebody that will do that will help you navigate difficult conversations about how to push for more responsibility, how to negotiate salary increases. That's a really difficult thing. And I always sort of looked to people to have those discussions before having them with my bosses. And even when it might be time to leave your job and look for new opportunities, you need to find people that you can have those discussions with. And those people will evolve over time. I still keep 2 or 3 advocates with me at all times. They've changed over time, but I rely on them heavily, both personally and professionally as I navigate my career. And it's something I'm really passionate about giving back. Those advocates played such an important role for me, so I'm really passionate about finding people that are looking for an advocate and giving that back. The next one, the right safety net lets you take big risks. This is one of my favorite pictures from the BMO expansion. This is when it was under steel. And this, of course, is if you've been to the Monster Energy compound during 10 Day. We just happened to get a shot of this at the exact right time. If you have established a strong support system and you've found those advocates in your corner, you can take big risks. Leaving traditional practice to join the Calgary Stampede was a huge risk. I didn't know a lot about the organization apart from the 10 days in July that we've all experienced. I didn't know if I was leaving at the time for a singular project. Like, would there be more projects after the BMO, or was this a 5-year stint? And I was leaving a fairly safe net at the time. And I didn't know if, what I would be doing when this project was over. And so would I miss design? Would I miss the traditional sort of like speed at which architecture offices operate, the open office concept? There was a lot of things that changed when I went to Stampede, and they were like, this is your office and you will sit in it with a closed door. All of those things were such a big risk and such a difference from how I'd been working. But I had the people behind me who were like, you should do this. This is a really great opportunity. And when I did, and through the encouragement of those people, I let go of the handlebars, I leapt, and I can tell you that it's been the most pivotal point of my journey. It's led to significant personal and professional growth, and I love my job. If you had told me 10 years ago I was going to stand up here in a leather fringe jacket and a cowboy hat, I would have found that quite amusing. But it's become who I am, and I've landed where I was meant to be. I've been there for 7 years now, and I see myself staying there for a really long time. But again, it took a risk, and it took that leap of faith to do that. This is the 17th Ave Victoria Park Stampede Station. If you recall the old station, and you had the unfortunate experience to take it, and take the Plus 15 network over McLeod, it wasn't a great experience. This is the upgrade that removed barriers and provides our guests access at grade to Stampede Park. What it's done is it's reopened the front door at 17th Ave, and it's been a significant urban design shift. And I liken that to, as you progress through your career, you build your access to knowledge, to resources, and to the right network of people. Sharing those resources provides you with the ability to remove barriers for others. And often I find it can be as simple as, you should call this person, they've had that similar challenge. Or you should go and have lunch with this person, I think they'd have some interesting things to say to you. It can be really small like that, but that can be really impactful for people, just to share your knowledge. Oh, I did a project like that, let me tell you about, what happened. Access removes barriers. Empower those around you to shine. I have a very different role now, I'm on the owner's side. But I have a very different ability to influence through that and support the industry. So over my first few years, when we were interviewing construction teams and consulting teams for our projects, I was noticing an overall lack of diversity in the teams that were being put forward. And I thought a lot about how could I, as the owner who was hiring those teams, change that or influence change in that. And so I recognized that I couldn't write an RFP because we publicly procure our projects, often with government funding, that said you shalt have a woman on your team. And so at the end of the day, I want to be clear, you always want to hire the best team for the project. But I really wanted to think about gender aside, were we missing an opportunity to try and influence those opportunities? And so what we did is that now every RFP that we post on the Calgary Stampede includes our language about our diversity practices. And we hoped through that the respondents would understand that what we were asking for in their project team reply. And I'm just going to read it to you because I think it's important. So, as an organization that exists for the benefit of community, inclusion and equity are woven into our core values of Western hospitality, pride of place, integrity, and commitment to the community. We encourage our own teams to consider and welcome the unique contributions of people in terms of their culture, ethnicity, sex, gender identity and expression, nation of origin, age, languages spoken, color, religion, ability, sexual orientation, education, beliefs, and opinions. So that now lives in our RFP. We don't say after it, you shall follow this in your own company, but we've seen a significant shift in terms of the teams being put forward for our projects and in how they're responding to it. And a lot of times it's actually just even including what their DE&I policy is for their own companies. And so I can say that the last few projects on Park have been heavily represented by women, both in design and construction. Jen and I, along with the S2 team, working on the North Infield project that Stephen was talking to, not only on the S2 side is it heavily represented by women, but I can tell you the Ellis Dawn team, that is the construction manager on the team, also has a significant portion of women on their team. And so it's making those small things. I can tell you that what we're doing was the strategy we took, and then you tell us what you're doing to empower change. And so with that, I'm just going to end with a slide about the Calgary Stampede, because I think it's really important that, you know, in terms of this give to gain, that's really what the Stampede is about. And that's probably one of the reasons that I've really enjoyed working there. It aligns with my core values. And so it says here, you know, for over 100 years, the Calgary Stampede has been at the heart of community. And so Calgary Stampede gives to gain on a daily basis. We're a very diverse organization. It's a really exciting place to work, and I've really enjoyed that sort of progression through my career and where I've ended up. So thank you for the time today.
Hello. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa Chabot. I'm one of the interior design leads here at S2. And I have the pleasure of welcoming our next keynote speaker, Lourdes Juan. So I'm going to have to read my notes because you are very accomplished, and I want to make sure that I get everything right here. But Lourdes is a Canadian entrepreneur and urban planner with masters in environmental design. She has founded and led a diverse range of companies spanning from urban planning, real estate, hospitality, and food security. Lourdes is also an award-winning entrepreneur. She has been recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women and has also been recognized by L'Oréal Paris for her impact and leadership. She has also been a recipient of both Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal and King Charles III Coronation Medal. Wow. Closer to home, she is a distinguished graduate from the University of Calgary and a recipient of the U Calgary Alumni ARC Award. She's also the founding partner of Hive Development and co-founder and CEO of Need Technologies, a software company working to reduce food waste and quantify carbon offsets. She's a board of director for several Calgary-based organizations supporting initiatives related to the city building, affordable housing, and social justice. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Lourdes Juan.
I'm also very pregnant and very out of breath all the time, so please bear with me. Thank you for having me today. Happy International Women's Day celebration to you all, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'll start with my very favorite photo taken of me. Firstly, before this photo was taken before marriage and children, so I look very well rested. But secondly, it was my first day on Calgary Planning Commission. And this was what feels like a million years ago. My very first day, I was so excited. It was my first big board position. And I got to council chambers, and my nameplate said Mr. L. Juan, because the majority of CPC members were male at the time, and I think still are, although I think we have a female chair now. And so it made sense that, of course, all of the nameplates would start with Mr. But for me, it's a reminder that, you know, there's still a lot of work to do, particularly around International Women's Day, but every day. As mentioned, I'm an urban planner by profession, hence why I sat on Calgary Planning Commission for 4 years. I graduated from the University of Calgary with Ali Rizzuto, actually, from S2. And my urban planning company, we focus on contentious development. So a lot of talking to the public and community engagement. I don't know if anyone has heard about the blanket rezoning debacle that's going on, but we're part of that. And we do all the fun stuff, land use redesignations and development permits. But my career journey has really been unconventional. I started in architecture. For those maybe who have been around for a long time, BCMP Architects was my first job a really long time ago. I was 14 years old when they took a chance on me and hired me to glue carpet samples on poster board, which was a really interesting introduction to architecture and planning. But I've taken a turn into sort of the social aspect of city building, urban planning, and cities. And I started really being interested in food waste and the implications of that in our city. So I'll start with a question that I ask every audience, and I hope there's no food waste experts in this crowd. But when food gets to the landfill, it emits methane gas, which is 25 times more powerful than CO2. Food is wasted at every level of the supply chain. So if you think from farmers to transportation, grocery stores, on our own plates. And so really, food waste is sort of a curse in that we just never get away from it. We're all guilty of it. Our systems and our cities and site planning really favor disposal of food and not redistribution. And I'll get into that in a moment. And when we talk about the social side of our cities, how many people are food insecure? In Canada, it's 10 million people. And so if we look at, this sort of problem we have of all of this excess going to waste, and the social problem that we have of food insecurity, I always start with what percentage of food is wasted in Canada. So by show of hands, does anyone think it's 10%? Very smart not to go with the first one. 20%, over 30%. Okay, it's 46% of the food is wasted in Canada. Now, when we think of how much food is wasted globally, let's talk about the dollar amount. So if anyone has any guesses, at 100 million, don't choose the first one, there you go, 500 million, 1 billion, we're seeing a trend here, it's 940 billion. That's how much food we waste at a global scale. So meanwhile, in our communities and our cities, on First Nation land all over the world, food insecurity rates are spiking. So basically, food insecurity is the notion that you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. And that's happening right here in our city. I think 20 or 25% of our households identify as food insecure. Families are really looking at, do I pay my utility bill? Am I late on that bill? Do I feed my kids? Do I feed myself? Or feed my kids, or what do I do? And that's really a lot of the really tough decisions that folks are having to make right in our city. So this sort of came about because one night I did a pickup here from a local bakery. I was asked to just pick up some excess bread. I thought I'd be picking up sort of like 2 bags of bread, putting them in my car, and bringing them to the drop-in center. But in fact, the one bakery that I picked up one night in 2012 had 200 pounds of bread. So that would take up like the majority of this stage. I had a Honda Civic at the time, and I'm like stuffing this bread into my Honda Civic. I did not know where to bring it. I knew that there was a place called the Drop-In Center in downtown Calgary, and I brought it there. And they were so gracious at the step. Actually, Elizabeth Fry Society is one of the folks that we worked with when I grew this organization. But I brought it to the drop-in center, and they said, this is great, we're going to serve 3,000 meals tomorrow. So this is going to go a long way. The bread was baked that morning. There's nothing wrong with it. If we weren't there to pick it up, it would have gone into the landfill. So what happened was I voluntold my family and friends to start picking up from different locations. I was a new entrepreneur at the time, so my office was coffee shops. I was working out of Starbucks and Phil and Sebastian's. And at the end of the night, I would just ask if I could come back and pick up that food. And so it really became a logistical game, driving around the city. I got a lot of mileage out of that Honda Civic. And I grew what's now called the Leftovers Foundation, which is Western Canada's largest food rescue organization, and the second largest in Canada. And what I've learned through this sort of notion of food rescue is that we cannot solve food insecurity by food rescue, but we can really help manage the food systems in our cities to better help. And that's really where my urban planning lens comes into this. And this actually happened before I knew Carrie was going to be here. I always talk about this story because it's a bit of a rebellious story, which I'm less rebellious now with a toddler and being 5 months pregnant. But we heard that the midway at the Stampede, there was lots of food being thrown away. A lot of the vendors were from the US, and so when they come up, they can bring their food, but when they go down, it gets thrown away at the border. So the very last day of Stampede hired a local company at the time to do waste management, and we knew them. They gave me, I'm sort of embarrassed telling the story in front of Carrie, so I'm not gonna look at her. They gave me like a fake badge, and I went in at midnight on the last day of the Stampede back in 2016, and we picked up 2 tons of food. And that distributed into community, to the Alpha House, to the drop-in center. I'm sure some went to Elizabeth Fry. And it really got some traction on social media. It's the only, free thing we had to talk about the charity. But that's how the Stampede found out that I was there picking up food. It's how AHS found out too, and they weren't super pleased, but they let us back formally the year after. We actually interviewed for a lot of the articles that came out, and now the Stampede actually does have food recovery measures built in. Oh, thank you. Thank the Stampede. And not noticing that I was there with a wagon. So a few years into the charity, I really love problem solving, particularly when it's a very complex issue like food waste and food insecurity. I think that sort of comes when you're an urban planner and you're looking at things from a very macro level, or architects and engineers that love to solve a problem. And one of the sort of spin-offs that came out of the Leftovers Foundation is a social enterprise called Fresh Roots. And so this sort of food recovery and urban planning hat led me to understand food and how it moves through our cities, the inequalities of food, how we have 14 food deserts in our city. And so what that means is it's either a food desert or a food swamp. So you have neighborhoods that don't have access to healthy and affordable food. Perhaps there's lots of artisan food, perhaps there's lots of A&Ws and fast food, but nothing, fresh, locally sourced produce for our communities. A lot of the way we plan our cities have been that affordable grocery store lies on the outskirts of our cities. So if you think sort of like, we're getting better now in downtown actually, but at the time, a lot of the superstores and all that were kind of on the outskirts of Calgary. And I really wanted to address inexpensive grocery. And so we created a pilot that lived under the charity for a while until it got bigger. And we created a mobile market called Fresh Roots that works on a food dignified model. And we worked with social workers to make this happen. And to me, food dignity was really about affordability, that you could afford to buy your food on a weekly basis, that it's convenient, so it shows up right at your doorstep, that the food is culturally appropriate, and that you have no proof of income. And so a lot of organizations that provide food, you have to really prove how poor you are to access your basic human right of food, which I think is fundamentally, it's a tough pill to swallow. So because I sat on CPC at the time, I had access to many different city folks that wanted to help me address food insecurity. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with the director of transportation at the time, Ryan Vander Putten, if anyone's ever worked with him. I asked at CPC if I could have a city bus, and he said yes. And I said, I don't have any money to give to you for this bus. I jokingly asked for it for $1. And he gave me 2 city buses for $2. So I got my wish. One, we turned into scrap metal because it was no longer usable. And so we made $900. So my entrepreneurial hat was really working that day. And then we turned this other one into a mobile grocery store on wheels. There's one in Halifax, there's one in Calgary, there's one in St. Louis. Those were the 3 at the time. It's sort of like the new phase of a food dignified model. So buses are, as you designers know, already barrier free. So you can go on there with a stroller. We removed the chairs and we turned it into like a grocery store aisle. And this stops at affordable housing complexes, transit stops, Indigenous communities around Calgary, and partners with other nonprofits so that people can get access to healthy food. So to wrap up, I do feel like the food recovery is the next big thing for our cities. We created a software when I was at the Leftovers Foundation. I pulled that software out a few years ago and started a tech company called Need Tech because it all started with bread. And we created a platform for food redirection. So it's a tech venture it's a tech company that's venture backed by social impact investors and angel investors. And we sell the software to cities and those in food recovery. So we've been able to work on really cool projects, just like the Stampede, all over North America. We partnered with the city of Phoenix and we picked up from the WNBA All-Star Game, which was really cool. And then in Detroit, we partnered with the NFL and redirected 100,000 pounds of food with a nonprofit organization there at the NFL draft. Thank you for listening to my work. This work has helped me look at cities in a whole new light and that cities and communities really gain resilience when we treat surplus as a resource and not as a liability, and that we can plan cities and design them for better stewardship of food, people, and place. And I look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Right. We are going to take a short 20-minute break to reset for our panel discussion. Feel free to top up your glass, grab a bite to eat, and join us back in your seats in about 20 minutes at 5 o'clock to start our panel. During the panel discussion, we'll be taking audience questions on Slido. Scan the QR code to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for regrouping so quickly. We are going to have our panel discussion coming up next. So our panel sees the return of S2's Jean Giguère, Carrie Suriol, and Lorda Swan. They are joined by Karma Holmes. Karma is the Alberta North Division Manager for Buildings Engineering and the National Practice Lead for Buildings at Associated Engineering. She has over 25 years of progressive engineering experience in structural design and project management. Starting in high school, Karma's interest in construction developed into a passion for architecture and engineering. She has since grown into a senior role at Associated. Karma has worked with many municipal, Indigenous, and industrial clients throughout her career and is known for her collaborative and responsive approach to project delivery. She served as a director on the Associated Engineering Group Limited Board from 2015 to 2024. Karma was a member of the City of Edmonton Design Committee from 2018 to 2021 as the APEGA representative and was vice chair for her last 2 years. Karma is also an active champion for women in science and engineering. In addition to being a mentor and a sponsor at Associated, Karma volunteers with the University of Alberta's Wiser Mentorship Program. Thank you for joining us. And we are joined by Vera Ilnitsky. Vera is a transformational leadership and business coach who helps women solopreneurs and founders create a genuine, confident, and fulfilled life through their businesses. Prior to launching her coaching business in 2022, Vera enjoyed a 25-year corporate career where she provided collaborative leadership to build and implement marketing campaigns and initiatives, as well as drive employees' engagement and organizational culture. Today, she's known for her grounded presence, intuition, and powerful blend of mindset and business tools. Vera believes we're not meant to be on this journey alone, which is why she's committed to uplifting others through the power of community. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to today's Build Together panel.
Thank you, Shad. Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here. Shad didn't mention that I'm also used to work for S2 Architecture. This is kind of a full circle moment for me, so thank you so much for, did it go away? So thank you so much for inviting me today to moderate this panel. I was really inspired by everyone's keynote addresses, and Karma, I look forward to hearing more from you in the panel as well. So I have some specific questions for each of you, but I thought that I would just start off with a general question that we can kind of go through each. And also a reminder to the audience that there is a Slido code there that you can answer your own, or ask your own question, and we'll go through that as well. So if there's some audience questions, please go ahead and type them in, and we will get to those as well. So I'm going to start with Lourdes because you're right next to me here. We know that the topic for this year's International Women's Day is Give to Gain, and the theme for today's event is Build Together. And I'm curious what Build Together and Give to Gain mean to you in the context of your career and your leadership.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think as an urban planner, when I was in school, I really struggled to kind of figure out what path in urban planning I wanted to go down. There's, sort of this sort of a design side of things, there's a political side, there's a social side, there's an environmental side, and I really struggled with trying to figure out which aspect I wanted to do. It turns out I wanted to do all of them, but I couldn't do that sort of alone or with no one else's input. And so when I started my entrepreneurial journey and started to think about how we build good companies that do good things and charities that have sort of a sustainability effect and a lasting effect, what we really needed was to build that together. So I think urban planners have a knack for kind of like seeing everything at that macro level and saying, okay, no, I'm going to build this mobile grocery store. I want to make sure it serves who I want it to serve. And so we need to talk to Indigenous communities, we need to talk to social workers about nutrition, about how we get mobile grocery stores and food security into these communities. And I think with that lens of not discounting anyone's experience, lived experience, background, technical background, we were able to sort of make sure that we were hitting the problem through an array of different lenses. And I think that's sort of something that I take into all of the other companies as well.
Thank you. Carrie, same question for you. What does Build Together and Give to Gain mean to you in the context of your career?
Yeah, I think the Build Together one is really sort of strikes a chord for me in terms of, some of the most meaningful projects to me that I've had the opportunity to work on have been because of the teams that have worked on those projects, and really aligning yourself with strong teams on these projects is also, part of the give to gain. I think in a project environment, everybody gets to give a little bit of their knowledge. Everybody gets to give a little bit of their expertise, but what you really get to gain is what you're learning from the other people on the project. And so, Jen and I had a really unique opportunity to work together on the BMO expansion. I think it's probably once in your life that you get to work on a $500 million project with a very large team, but a very really driven team, all sort of marching towards the same end goal. And I would say, in my career, that really stands out in terms of what I gained back from that project was far more than what I was able to give to that project, and that was because of the people that worked on it.
Amazing. Thank you. Karma, what about you? What does it give to gain mean to you?
Well, I love some of the comments that have already been given. I'll throw a bit of a different spin on the question, maybe looking at our internal organization. We have a really cool group called WISER, which stands for Women in Science and Engineering Retention. And as a lot of you know, there's probably a lot of engineers in the room. They struggle. I guess there's a goal for 30% of students to be a female by 2030, but they're not going to make the goal. Different disciplines have different levels of percentages, but we, about a decade ago at Associated, we noticed there was probably more women leaving the profession than compared to their male counterparts. So we implemented this committee, and I think as time has evolved and as generations have changed, a lot of the initiatives that the WISER group came up with were maybe initially driven by women, like for example, parental leave, mentoring circles in addition to one-on-one mentoring programs. But they've actually turned around to be a gain and be a benefit for all of our staff. So flexible work arrangement was another WISER initiative that luckily they were half planned in 2019, and then sure enough, like we were ready. So I think a lot of those great grassroots ideas from the women and from listening to them internally resulted in probably a big improvement in our culture overall, and have been a benefit to the staff and families that work at Associated.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing up the internal organizational culture. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Jen, what about you? I know you mentioned this a little bit in your opening remarks, but what does give to gain mean to you in your leadership?
I would say at the core, it probably goes back to, again, those interpersonal relationships. And, men or women, like everybody has their life aside from work. So I think as an employer, it can be a daunting profession to enter. And sometimes it's just helping somebody to kind of just give them that little nudge to just say, it's not comfortable, but let's work through it. Or, you don't know how to approach this problem, let's sit down and talk about it. So I think that by doing that, we encourage those that, sometimes are perhaps a bit more shy or reserved, or, frankly, just like I did, grew up in a household that were very like pink job, blue jobs. And, encourage, anyone to step out of their comfort zone. And really proud to say that over the course of, S2 as an organization, that things did get more flexible. And that also extends to parental leave. We've had a number of guys that have taken time with their family. And it's great to see that it's accepted, it's embraced, and, we love to see people back because we have that flexibility.
I'm going to keep the microphone there, Jen. I have another question for you. You mentioned at the beginning that when you started your architectural career journey, you were the only female architect. And I'm really curious how you felt in that space and what helped you stay and grow and really keep that self-trust in yourself to keep moving in a space where you didn't see anyone else that was like you.
Well, I would say, so S2 is basically the third firm where I landed. And only one, and S2 did not have any women architects. There were interior designer, there were people in the administrative, team that were men. We had women technologists, which was great to see. But there's only one firm that I was at that had, a woman architect, not necessarily in a leadership position, but she was definitely more senior. And I saw her approach things, basically have to be somebody that she wasn't. And that was a turnoff. So when I decided to, kind of keep going, and I had some doubts. I had some real doubts, probably into 7 to 8 years into my career, if that's really something that I wanted to pursue, because I was not, I couldn't really see how that path was there for me. But through French Canadian fashion, I speak my mind, and I think if anything, that is probably what got me to where I was. And I also had, like amazing mentors at S2. The two founding partners are, they were definitely, they felt like family to me. So it was a very comfortable forum for me to go and have a chat and ask questions and not be judged because I had a different opinion. So if anything, that kind of gave me the drive to keep going. And, as I said, in my opening remarks, I did at some point find my voice, and then I realized how important it was to maybe sometimes be the voice for others that weren't quite there yet.
Thank you. Karma, did you have an experience with that as well, where you needed to find your own voice and your own authenticity in what I'm assuming is a male, you were also in a male-dominated profession and industry. So I'm curious about your experience with that.
Absolutely. I think early in my career, particularly in construction, I guess, I graduated in the late 90s from engineering school. So even some of my summer job experience had construction as part of a component of that. And no doubt about it, I was the only woman around. I didn't have any role models that were women at my office either. So I think it really had to come, it was a very intrinsic thing for me. But I think through the support of a couple of great managers, I think that really kind of helped diffuse some of the doubt that I had in myself. And the more I got experience, I got into project management, again, slowly you start working with more and more women, and it solidifies the belief in yourself and the fact that you can be yourself. Because I relate to what you're saying, the predecessors maybe were trying to wear big shoulder pads and be in the boardroom and be somewhat aggressive, and that didn't appeal to me. But I did find my own voice and my own style, and I think just blind determination also helps. But I kind of reflecting back on one of my summer jobs as a university student, I had a job with a government organization, a utility company, and I remember this manager who was the boss's boss's boss, and he called me into his office one day, and it was probably about 3 weeks into my summer job, and I was just going to be at a desk doing, remember scanning plans, for, the student job. He wasn't very charismatic, he wasn't very suave, but he just said to me really bluntly, "What do you want out of this summer?" Because it was my last summer before my final year, and he said, "You can stay at the office, or you can go out on this job site." And they were building a pipeline and an intake at the time. And I don't know probably the easy road would have been just to stay in the office because I could have my nights free. And but I said, I want the construction experience. And it was the scariest time up to that point probably for me, but I look back on that experience as something that it charted my path forward. Like I knew what I wanted to do after I graduated, and heaven forbid, he was really not charismatic at all. But luckily, I was able to, embrace that opportunity, and so full credit to him. He's probably long retired, but yeah.
Not charismatic, but still supportive. So that was good. And I hear that you said yes to the opportunity, which was great. And Carrie, that kind of brings me to something you said in your remarks where you talked about taking a leap of faith and having faith in yourself. So can you expand a little bit on that and how you've kept the faith in yourself, especially, again, being maybe an only woman in a lot of different capacities?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe just to build on a little bit of what Jen and Karma shared, early in my career, I think the way that I found my path was the ability to sort of recognize early what my strengths were. And I recognized early that I wasn't a designer. So for those of you that work in architecture, that wasn't my strength. I could sort of scrape by in the design world. But I recognized that I was actually a really good project manager, and I was really good at speaking with clients and sort of navigating meetings. And I recognized that the really strong designers maybe weren't as good at that. And so what I started to do is I started to align myself with people where I had the ability to shine in what I was good at. And so align myself with good designers because they needed my skills, and then together that sort of let me have my voice in those meetings. And I think naturally through that is why I have gravitated to being on the project management side and eventually moving to the owner side. And so, yeah, the biggest leap of faith when I went to the Stampede was that there was such a sort of sense of pride
of having gutted out, like getting myself to be a registered architect, having that was, there was like a sense of stature in that, and I was really hesitant to leave that behind and to switch to the owner side, and I knew, and I still get asked often, like, do you regret leaving architecture? And my answer now is very firmly, I do not for 1 second do I regret it. I've found my place, but it was a leap of faith to sort of like, after you've been through sort of the trenches in getting that registration and getting there and working in architecture, to leave that, it definitely took a leap of faith, but I'm happy. And, and I mentor a lot of interns through the AAA process, but also people like just that I meet through the industry. And I talk a lot about that, about like find what you are really good at and find what you like to do, and your path will come from that. And it doesn't have to be linear, doesn't have to be the traditional path of interning, registration, always in architecture. Architecture can open up so many doors, and so can engineering, architecture, construction, all of that. There's so many different career paths out there, but it's really about finding your passion and what makes you happy when you get up in the morning.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Lourdes, you're a self-professed rebel. So how did you stay authentic to that and through the process of doing all the things that you've done in the businesses you've started?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I have unabashedly put my hand up for things I'm not qualified for. I don't know where that started. I'm the daughter of immigrants. Maybe that's where. I think for me, and just listening to some of these stories that resonate so much, the development world is very, I think still, it's getting better, but when I first started, definitely very male-dominated. And then I got into this world of tech, which is like 10 times worse. We're also a venture-backed tech company, and so, I don't know if you know the statistic, 2% of venture capital goes to women-led companies, even though we perform much better in tech. 0.34% of that goes to women that look like me. And so it's sort of always been this uphill battle. I think for me, it's always been about like the impact and working with the right teams and making sure that we're kind of working toward that very common goal. And so I think being very mission aligned has kind of really sort of helped with that rebelliousness.
So how do you think that we can build environments? I mean, we're all here in a capacity of building environments, building communities, building cultures, building organizations. But how can we do that where all voices and all different types of people feel safe contributing their bold ideas or maybe different ideas or different perspectives?
For me, in the community engagement world, a lot of what we see in terms of the problems is very structural. And so when we have a very contentious development and we're asked to do a lot of community engagement, the people that are able to come to the table usually all look the same, usually are retired, have had a long career, have a lot of time on their hands, have a lot to maybe complain about, if I can use that word lightly. And so we get a lot of that, like NIMBYism, we get a lot of that same kind of voice at the table all the time. And I really do think it's a structural issue. We don't have tools out there. We don't make it easy for other folks with different ideas to come out and give those ideas on how to city build. I think the city is, trying to do a better job at that. But we've had, basically one monotonous voice at the table, and we need to make it easier for, even this room is a room of pretty diverse folks, for these folks to be able to comment on city building and make sure we're getting it right.
Carrie, what about in your opinion? Like, what do you see that we can do to create a broader way to have different voices and different perspectives at the table?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's a lot of exposure is maybe the word that I would use. And so, it's finding the exposure to some of that diversity, to some of your people. So often when people will call me and say, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, I ask them, so why me? Like, what do you know about my career? Why do you think we would align well? And there's been times when I've said, I don't think I'm a good fit for you, but actually I know somebody that is a good fit for you. And so I'm going to introduce you to this person, and I think you would align with what they're looking for. And so it's really like the more voices you can get exposed to, and the more things that like this that you can attend, and people that you can meet through happenstance, and people that you can meet through your connections, you really start to sort of understand that it's out there, but you have to dig to find it.
So I'm hearing some taking accountability for yourself, as well as an organizational change, systemic change, but also taking responsibility to do your own digging and your own getting involved in different things, right? Yeah. Karma, you mentioned, organizational change, and I'm curious if you can dig a little bit deeper into that in terms of what you're doing or what you're seeing that can happen in organizations to have more people come with their perspectives, their opinions, and be able to kind of shape the culture from within.
I don't think anything's overnight. It does take time, and obviously, as generations progress, things are evolving. But I think sometimes there's a hesitation for people to speak up when they look at a senior leader in the company or a suite of leaders in the company who have got success a certain way. They're intimidated by them. They presume that there's a formula to their success. There's a formula to their journey. But when you have a curious mind and you've maybe are able to tap into them on an individual basis, it's often surprising, at least in my experience, and I know a lot of people who've told this to me when they've talked to me, they're surprised with how candid or maybe how humble or how open we are. Maybe it's more of a myth than a reality. I think there's a lot of people that have the imposter syndrome in leadership, and everyone, everyone's a lot of people are open to hearing other perspectives and other thoughts on topics. And specifically with the topic of parental leave, it was something that we knew some of our competitors were doing, and definitely, some of our staff would choose to leave to work maybe for public sector where the benefits were presumably a lot better than consulting. I think it took a curious mind to maybe, for a few strong wills to sort of dig in and figure out the stats and figure out what the real payment or the real cost would be. And as they figured out the way, the pros and cons, both qualitative and quantitative, they were able to convince our president. And it was him that just said, okay, you convinced me, let's do it. And so I think he had a life where, he had maybe more of a traditional upbringing and traditional family life, but he was open to the feedback as long as it was presented in sort of, it had the numbers with it, but it also had the social benefit. And I think even when that program was rolled out, where we have 12 weeks of additional top-up, it was a handful of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I don't even think that he appreciated how big a deal it was going to be to the men in our company, and to the families of our employees. So that was one encounter, well, probably a lot of discussions, but one individual making that conscious decision. And if people had been too scared to bring it up, we would be in a different place. So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing, and I love that you brought up that it's impacting men positively as well. It's not just a women conversation, but it's a family conversation. It's an everybody conversation. So I really appreciate that. Jen, what about you? You've built out, you're managing all the people at S2, and you're building out this culture. So what are you seeing in how we can create more opportunities for people to speak up and create an opportunity for you, like even you mentioned in your opening remarks, to have even maybe some conflicting thoughts and opinions, and how do you manage through that and still come out at the end of the day with some sort of consensus?
It's a good question. I would say maybe what Karma just alluded to is that imposter syndrome. And, the number of times I've been asked, how do you do it all? Well, I don't. And, maybe there's a front there that's not, it's not 100% authentic. I have to look like I got it all figured out, but I don't. You know, like there's lots of morning I'm just going like, holy crap, what am I? This is like, wow. But I think it's to be honest about it. And to, you know, like to be vulnerable. And, you know, like I've had, you know, like a number of young women, you know, in our industry, and they just like, but like, how do you do it all? Just like, when my kids were 3 and 5, I was not volunteering on the AAA and on the CA board and running a company. And I was leaving at 3 because I had to pick up my kids at the bus stop at 3:20. And that's a reality. And you can do it all, but not all at the same time. And it's okay to have that conversation. And whether you're, you know, like men or women, you know, like you have families or you have other priorities, you have aging parents, it's okay. Like we all have personal lives and we all have elements in our lives that, you know, like end up conflicting sometimes. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict, but unless at the leadership we're also open to that conversation and we're receptive to the conversation, and we also portray that, you know, I have my, you know, there's nothing now that I used to never even talk about my kids at work because that was just not something that I did. And now it's just like, no, it's okay. Like I'm a mom and an architect, you know, I enjoy gardening and I enjoy cooking, and it's okay to talk about that. And, you know, like it doesn't have to be this false front that is put in front there that, you know, like I got it all. So I think to have that open discussion and to be receptive to it is very important.
Well, thank you for your honesty, Jen. I appreciate it. I'm also curious how women specifically influence community building and space building and creating environments, both externally, like building cities and building spaces, and also building organizations. Like, how do women uniquely shape that conversation? Jen, I'll just bring it back to you.
That's a loaded question. I think anyone that enters our industry, whether it's architecture, interior design, engineering, whether you're on the client or you know in the traditional practice, I think there's an element of just living and breathing that, you know, that creativity, but also like the built environment. And I think that influence is ultimately what comes down. And I think you have to care about people to be able to create, you know, spaces for people. And I'm not necessarily sure that, you know, like I definitely don't think that it's, you know, just a woman vision on it. We have amazing, creative, you know, individuals, you know, throughout all our organization. But I think it really comes down to the core of, you know, you need to care about people and what they do and how they live and how they play and how they work to be able to influence that built environment.
Carrie, what about you? Have you seen a change and a shift as women have more of a voice in organizations and in shaping communities and cities about something specific that they bring to the table in terms of that maybe other people don't?
You know, I think early in my career, I used to get nervous saying like bold statements like men and women design different. I think I used to shy away from that and be like, everybody can design equally. But now I'm more confident in that. Like I do honestly believe that women and men approach design problems differently. And I think that you get the best of that actually when your team has both at the table. But I think women bring a different approach, a different sensibility, and in terms of shaping communities, I just think it's got a different take on it. And so as we see more women being represented on these projects and these city changing projects, they're changing, and you can see that, and you can see it on the teams, and you can see it in the results. And I think it's really great for where architecture and design is headed, and same with corporations, right? In terms of, you know, at the executive level and the senior level, as you see that shift to more women being in positions to make decisions, it is changing because their approach is different.
And Karma, I know you've sort of mentioned the women's voice in your organization in terms of having some new policy changes and things like that. How else have you seen women shape either organizations or even the engineering environment more broadly?
Yeah, when you talk about the built environment, I mean, one of the things I love the most about my job is how many communities we get to work with and how many changes we can make, particularly when it comes to, anything that benefits kids. I have a soft spot, of course, but I think that women do bring a different sensibility, as discussed, but also our collaborative instincts and maybe our instinct to make sure that everyone who is a decision maker gets a chance to speak. I'm sure a lot of the people on the panel would have flashbacks of those meetings when maybe there's a dominant PM who just kind of mansplains everything, and maybe the city councillor is a woman that has a great opinion, but maybe she doesn't feel that she can speak in that masculine room. I've worked on projects where the band chief is a woman, and we have the most thoughtful and productive conversations just one-on-one after the meeting, the official meeting. So I think women do bring, at least a lot of the women I work with, there's that instinct to make sure that everyone has had a chance to speak, or everyone has been able to feel that they've contributed, whether that's at the table or after. I think that's a superpower that a lot of women have that makes the end design product that much better, that much more collaborative, that much more an incorporation, a culmination of the vision of the individuals that are going to use the building after. We walk away after warranty period, but it's theirs for generations. So.
Thank you so much. Lourdes, what about you? How are you seeing that women have a special superpower, to use Karma's word, in the built environment?
I joke that before I had kids, I really believed in equality, and I was like, men and women are equal, and that's what we're fighting for. And then I had children, and I joke with my husband, and I'm like, no, I'm far more superior. Females are far more superior. Did you see what I did in that room? But to be less cheeky about that, my husband's favorite joke, I think women, particularly in the food security world and the social impact world, they carry a lot of that mental load. Where are we going to eat tonight? What's the grocery list? What's going to be in the fridge? And who's doing lunches? And all of that, I think, in the impact world is on women to kind of figure out. So when I translate that into the urban planning world and we're doing roundtables and having engagement sessions, it's a lot of the women that bring in different perspectives about just daily life and daily chores, and because everything is on our mind all the time. That's a generalization, but for the most part, I think we just bring a different aspect to things. I was on a panel once for the washrooms in East Village, the pickleball courts that are now washrooms. And there was two women from CMLC and then myself and then two very revered architects, both male. And we had to sort of pick site location. And the site that made the most sense to me was by the playground because of bathrooms. And if you're taking your child to the playground, you need to be close to bathrooms. And in fact, the washrooms are now close to the playground. And I thought for a long time, I'm like, I don't know what I can bring. Like, these are world-class architects, and I'm like a, little girl planner on this thing. And then when I brought that, and they were like, oh yeah, it's a great idea. Why didn't we think of that? I thought, you know what, I do have something to bring. This is part of the superiority. I don't have the imposter complex. Apparently I have a superior complex.
Well, it's part of all the voices coming together, right? And having an opportunity, because everyone does have something to contribute. But when we only, talk to a certain number of the population, we're not going to get that full spectrum of opinions and experiences as well, right? Lindsay, how much time do we have? We're good? Okay. So I'm going to read, there's a couple of questions from the audience here. So what are practical steps leaders can take to bring the idea of build together forward? Lourdes, any ideas about that?
Practical steps to bring build together.
That leaders in organizations can take to bring the idea of building together forward, like into the future?
Yeah, I like this notion of reciprocity, and I think, like having sessions like this, asking about opinions of different people, listening more. What is it? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Those sorts of things I think are important when we take them into the professional world.
Carrie, what about you? Any ideas of what we can do moving forward?
Yeah, and I think some of the ideas that Jen and Karma spoke to too, like even understanding, your team's family dynamics, family challenges, commitments outside of the office, and how that plays into what they can contribute, and really finding sort of the fits for people. And so, working together in terms of finding those mentorship opportunities within within your organization, and aligning that well with other things that everybody has so much going on outside of the office. I think even more so than 10, 15 years ago. People do carry a lot, and helping them navigate that and understanding that actually your organization can be a resource for that as well, and really that sort of starts to reflect through the work. When people feel supported at work, personally and professionally, it starts to show up in their work, and everybody sort of gets that reciprocity and benefits from it.
Thank you. Karma, what about you? What can we do as leaders to build together as we move forward?
I think one of the great things about the Gen Zs is their desire to give back to the community, and if we can harness that in our organizations, I think there's such a desire to volunteer. So, we have a big campaign in October for United Way. We've got Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We've got Construction. I want to talk to Lourdes more about some of the things where we can maybe we've got some free labor to assist with some of these bread pickups. But I think there is a desire, and so as leaders, let's enable that. Let's empower that. Let's listen. Just because maybe it isn't top of mind to some of the other generations. I'm just always inspired by the Gen Zs and how much they want to give back to their local communities. So.
Excellent. And Jen, what about you? How can you as a leader take steps to bring the idea of building together more strongly into the future?
So I would encourage any leader at any level, and you don't have to be the owner of an organization, the CEO or director. At any level in your organization, sometimes there's this quiet person, that just doesn't say much, but they just do their work. Get to know them. Get to know who they are, what they bring to the table, the ideas that they have, because I think that that's something that is very often forgotten, is that, we have the louder people get the attention, they get maybe more the advancement. And I'm not saying, you do need to advocate for yourself if you're, an individual, but as, if you have more of that personality of, like being out there, and take the time to know those that are a little quieter, because very often, these people have these amazing ideas and they just don't feel they have a platform to share them. So I would encourage anyone to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And one last question to end off on the Give to Gain. Curious, after this panel discussion and your conversations with people in the audience, what have you taken away from today in terms of Give to Gain, and what do you want to commit to or declare that you're going to give to gain a little bit more in the future? I'm going to start with Lourdes.
Mentorship comes to mind. I think, I always think, I'm too busy for this, I'm too busy for that. But in fact, when I started at the architecture firm and I was 14, I could barely keep my eyes open at 8 in the morning. It was those mentors that really took a chance on me and gave me a chance and mentored me through my career. And later, when I started the tech company, actually, the prototype of the software was created with 14-year-old girls at Bishop McNally High School, and I mentored them through, this sort of Uber for food rescue that was in my head, and I wanted them to build this prototype, and we spent time in the high school computer lab. This is years ago now, and it has turned into sort of this global tech company. And so when I think of what I could do more is kind of maybe around that mentorship piece.
Wow, that's inspiring. Thank you. Carrie, what about you? What are you inspired to do more of?
Well, first of all, I'm going to get Lourdes an official Calgary Stampede name tag and badge so she can come on park, because I actually found everything that she was talking about today very inspiring, and I do know the Stampede has come a long way in terms of what we do with food waste. But actually, I think what was really interesting and what I aligned well with on Lourdes was that like your path doesn't have to be linear, and it doesn't have to, if you've been in urban design, you don't have to land in urban design, and if you've been in architecture, you might find your way differing from architecture. And so I just really continue to tell that story. I think it's an important one about all the different paths that people can take and giving back sort of through my story and other stories that I've been inspired by today. And I'm probably going to think about, honestly, my food waste a little bit more at home too. Yep.
Me too, Carrie. Karma, what are you inspired to do more of this year?
Well, I think being here was great, and I think it's easy for us to fall into our habits of just, food, work and home and wasting food. So I think, just getting out of your comfort zone a bit and participating in panels like this, in mentoring inside and outside your organization, all of these things, it's a little bit of a time commitment, but the reward is huge. And the relationships that you make with different charities, with university students, with your own staff, they can last. They can transcend the project. So I think it's just always keeping conscious that little bit of extrovert that I'm very uncomfortable with. It does pay off. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for being here. And Jen, what about you to end off? And what are you going to give more of this year?
I think it always comes back to, there's a portion of time, but how that time is spent. And perhaps, being more accessible. I think we all get, caught in the grind and, head down and, door closed. And you kind of maybe not are perceived as being as accessible to engage in a conversation. So definitely, probably will put that as my own goal.
Well, thank you very much. This has been inspiring for me. Thank you for being part of this panel, and thank you for allowing me to lead you through some questions. And hopefully that was really inspiring and motivating for everyone here too. So thank you.
So I'm fortunate to be giving out 5 awards this evening. Tonight we recognize a leader who truly embodies what it means to build together. Sarah Ahmed is an associate principal at Smith & Anderson, and she leads with both conviction and generosity. She actively supports women in engineering, mentors emerging professionals, and champions diversity and inclusion, not as an initiative, but as a daily practice. Sarah believes that we are smarter together. She builds strong, meaningful relationships across disciplines and perspectives, welcoming different voices to the table and ensuring they are heard. She uplifts others, she creates space, and she consistently imagines more for her team and community. Sarah, if you're here, thank you for amplifying equity and inclusion through action. Please join us on stage. Shall I just keep rolling, Lindsay? Okay. Our next award recognizes a leader who has consistently challenged expectations and expanded what leadership looks like. Susan Hahn has spent 25 years with Technion, moving across roles from estimator to sales leader to becoming the first female general manager of manufacturing facility in the company's history. Susan demonstrates that relationships matter. She leads with warmth and authenticity, backed by deep technical expertise. She imagines more, not only for production and performance, but for people. As a founding leader of women in Technion, she has actively supported women across the organization and helped create pathways in spaces where women have historically been underrepresented. Susan doesn't wait for a seat at the table, she builds it. Susan, thank you for showing us what relationship with impact truly looks like. Please come to the stage. I'm going to keep going. Kathleen Seville, I hope I said that right, exemplifies the spirit of give to gain. A professional engineer with nearly 20 years in mechanical consulting, she has built her career on collaboration, mentorship, and advocacy. But her impact reaches far beyond projects. As a founding member and former outreach director of Women in Consulting Engineering Calgary, she connected young girls to the world of engineering and creating meaningful pathways for newcomers navigating Alberta's licensing process. For nearly 2 decades, as a Girl Guide leader, she has inspired confidence, curiosity, and leadership in young women through hands-on STEM programming. Kathleen believes we are all smarter together. She invests in people, in their growth, their confidence, and their future. Kathleen, thank you for building opportunity wherever you go. Please join us. This award recognizes an ally, and a good friend of mine too, who uses his voice to amplify others. Shad Usman is someone who brings issues to light, who speaks up for underrepresented groups, and who believes leadership includes advocacy. Through his work at S2 in architecture and his service on not-for-profit executive committees, he demonstrates that community leadership extends beyond our offices and into the broader world. Shad lives the belief that relationships matter. He leads with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to engage in conversation that move our industry forward. Shad, thank you for showing that allyship is active, not passive. Please join us. And last but not least, Mariah Gordon-Dyke. Some leaders lead from the front of the room, others lead from the center of everything. Mariah is the glue that holds our S2 teams together. She supports every department, every personality, every last-minute request, always with grace and generosity. She goes above and beyond, not because it's required, but because she genuinely cares. Mariah demonstrates every one of our core values. She believes we are smarter together, she proves that relationships matter, and she consistently imagines more for the people around her, often quietly, but always impactfully. Mariah. And Lindsay, I believe there's a closing, but I don't have it. That's okay. How do you close?
Thank you all for joining us for Build Together. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to our gold sponsors, Remedy Engineering, RSM, Smith & Anderson, and Technion. We are also gratefully acknowledge our friend-level sponsors, AME Group, Cambria, Colliers, Fever Brand Development, Ground Cubed, Introba, Navicord, SMP Engineering, Urban Systems, and WOW Lighting and Controls. Your support plays an important role in making this event possible. And to everyone here, thank you for being a part of this event and for sponsoring our efforts to raise funds for the Elizabeth Fry Society of Calgary. Your presence truly has made a difference. As you enjoy the evening, we kindly encourage everyone to plan for a safe journey home. If you need assistance for transportation, please feel free to ask an S2 team member. Please have a wonderful evening, take time to connect with everyone, and thank you for being here.